Hi, welcome to One on the Page. I'm Scott. This is Five-Year Battle PG Wodehouse, the years 1912 through 1916. Let's get into it. This is one of the few 5-year periods where he published only 5 books. I believe he did it twice in his career, going through the 5-year periods. There's one 5-year period where he published less than 5 books, but generally 5 was the lowest amount he published, and often more. Like last time it was 7. I think starting next video, there'll be a few videos where there's like 8 to 10. Book number 1, published in 1912, is The Prince and Betty. The Prince and Betty has a lot of the same storyline as Smith Journalist, which we will see later in this video. When I say a lot of the same plot line, really a lot. I almost feel like The Prince and Betty was written after, and then it just kind of put the the stuff about the prince in his kingdom, kind of tagged it on there, but apparently it was written first. Basically, John Maude is a prince. He doesn't know it. His country, Mervo, becomes a republic, and his father goes to America, and he never knows that he's actually a prince until Mr. Scobles, I believe, brings him there because Mr. Scobles has a casino in Mervo, and the country is no longer a republic. So basically, kind of hires him to take his rightful place as prince. The casino owner also has a daughter who knew John Maude before. Mr. Scobles wants them to get married, doesn't know that they know each other. So when he tries to put them together, the daughter, Betty, thinks that John is just doing what his boss wants him to do, and she leaves. He, who is actually in love with her, basically provokes his country into revolution so that he can be put on his butt. He goes to America where his friend Rupert Smith is, of course, the same name as the Smith of Mike and Smith, although this one without the silent P, and has a lot of the same tendencies, has the little monocle and calling people comrade, but isn't as psychopathic, I would say, as the Rupert Smith that we know. He has a newspaper that he is the temporary editor for, and they discover basically slumlords and start writing about that, and then they get gangs coming after them. And unbeknownst to John, Betty uh, was working there as a stenographer and actually wrote an article about the slums until she saw John, and then she left. So there we basically have pretty much beat for beat the plot of Smith Journalist. So when I talk about Smith Journalist a little bit, I'll say, see The Prince and Betty. Cats using the litter box. So, so it's basically a romance around Smith Journalist. There's no romance in Smith Journalist. Uh, I prefer Rupert Smith of the Prince and Betty over Smith in Smith Journalist. I like John Maude. I like Betty. I I don't like the American dialect. I hate when Wodehouse uses American dialect. Being American, it just makes us whole sound really dumb. Which, hey, I mean, okay, but still. But of course, this book's going to be number 1 for now, at least. The second book, published in 1913, is The Little Nugget, which is about a boy, Ogden Ford. He's 14. His mother kidnaps him from his father. They are divorced. That doesn't go well, so he gets sent to boarding school. His mother's employee wants her fiance to kidnap him. The fiance is a rich man who basically gets engaged accidentally because he feels bad for her. And so he goes to school with plans to kidnap Ogden, finds out that there are other kidnappers there, that everybody's trying to kidnap Ogden. And then he finds that the woman he was engaged to like 5 years before, when he was a much worse person than he is now, is also there. And she had gotten married to somebody else, and they hadn't seen each other since. And so there's a kidnapping plot, which happens in Woodhouse. And there's a romance, which is just is not it's the least romantic romance that I've seen in Woodhouse. I think they don't have any chemistry and they don't really spend that much time together. There's no "I love you." Why? I liked it a little bit. I liked it a little bit more before I read it for the podcast. Then after the podcast, I liked it a little bit less. I do think it is going to be under the Prince and Betty for now. The next book is The Man Upstairs and Other Stories, which is a collection of short stories. It's not very typical for Woodhouse short story collections. Short story collections that we will see in the future will generally be like Jeeves or have a Blanding's Castle or Mr. Mulliner or a golf story, something like that. These are none of the characters that we might be used to from Woodhouse. A lot of them are around love and romance. Not as much humor that you will get from Woodhouse stories, I think. These are all kind of published around the 1910 time frame, it looks like. I did read it a long while ago, so I'm looking at the stories. I will have to say, looks like there's, I don't know, looks like there are about 19 stories. A lot of them, like I said, have to do with love and romance. Of the ones I look at and I see here, I think I liked The Man Who Disliked Cats. Generally, short story collections are going to do worse than novels. And in short stories where I don't know the characters in any way, I don't have any frame of reference, not even like a Drones novel where there's some secondary character from Jeeves and Wooster that's the main character in the short story. And like I said, these are more serious short stories. And whereas I like the serious novel, The Coming of Bill, I don't think Woodhouse doing serious and short stories works quite as well. I am going to go ahead and rank this at the bottom. Probably going to stay there. We'll see. Published in 1915 is Smith Journalist. Smith basically goes to the States. I forget exactly why he goes to the States. I think he goes along with Mike because Mike has a cricket tournament thing going on. We don't see a lot of Mike at all in this novel. At the beginning of the novel, and then at one point, I think in the middle of the novel, I don't think he appears anywhere else in the novel. Maybe at the end, whoa, maybe at the end, but I do not recall. Smith isn't as annoying in this one as he is in other ones, perhaps because he doesn't have other characters that we might like to be a jackass to. He's a jackass, but he's often a jackass to criminals and gang members. So it's not as bad. There's a gangster who loves cats who uh, Smith becomes friendly with because he saves his cat. He does have kind of a Mike like relationship with a character in here, but the character is nice on his own, but I still really miss Mike. And especially after having read the Prince and Betty and gotten the same plot with more likable characters also, it kind of makes me just think a little bit less of this one because Smith, Silent P. Smith, is just not an enjoyable character to me. I obviously Woodhouse must have loved him at least for a while. I will say after Leave It to Smith, he never wrote about Smith again. So I don't know why that came about. Be interesting to find out, but I read the biography of him and I don't think it mentioned anything in there about it. So I'm actually going to I am going to put this just under the Prince and Betty for now. So uh, two pretty much similar stories. I just think the Prince and Betty is better. The last book is Something Fresh, published in 1915, which is the first Blandings Castle book. Now, when it was published, did Woodhouse mean to make this a series? I don't know. The this first book is mainly centered on Ash Joan and Joan, who are neighbors, and they basically end up working at Blanding's castle together in the servants' quarter. One thing I really love about this novel that we don't get as much in the other Blanding's castle novels is the inner workings of the servants. We always get the butler Beach in the novels, and he actually becomes better as the books go along. But this is really the only novel where we really get the inner workings of Blanding's castle, the servants, what the servants see. And I really enjoyed that. That well, I love all the other Blanding Castle's books, I think. That is something that I miss is that we don't, I really love this from this first novel. We get introduced to uh, Freddie, Threepgood, and of course Beach the Butler, and of course Lord Emsworth. We meet one of his sisters. I can't remember which one. Was it Caroline? Maybe I don't know. He has so many sisters, and several of them pop out throughout the books. There's a theft. There's of course the efficient Baxter, who is uh, Lord Emsworth's secretary, who often appears in the novels even after he, spoiler alert, loses his jobs, which I think he does a few times. It it's not the best Blandings Castle book, I'll be honest. As far as the Blandings Castle, I really like Joan and Ash, and for a Woodhouse book about romance, they're really on kind of equal footing. There's not really the man and the diminutive girl, or uh, the man and the overbearing woman. They're really kind of equal footing. And for a Woodhouse book, uh, Joan really seems quite liberated. Um, so just really like this book. I like it especially for what it's starting. There's lots of great Woodhouse humor in here. And again, the whole servants point of view, I really loved. It's not something that Woodhouse does a lot. I mean, you have Jeeves, the valet, but except for one short story from his point of view, you don't really get his view. You just basically you have Birdie seeing him as the omniscient Jeeves. So Ash and Joan, also just one of my favorite romances in the books. So I do think I'm gonna go and put that one at number one. So at number 5, we have The Man Upstairs and Other Stories. At number 4 is The Little Nugget. Number 3 is Smith Journalist. Number 2, the book that was Smith Journalist before Smith Journalist, The Prince and Betty. And at number 1 is Something Fresh. So that is the years 1912 through 1916. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and I will talk to you next time.